Welcome to this edition of Culinary Curiosity. Today we're going to be doing some smoking out on a wood pellet grill, which is not something that I use very often. I'm actually at my sister's home, and I've decided to do a few smokes of pork butt and ribs and some other things I did yesterday to throw in the freezer. So if you're going to be visiting someone, it's always a good idea. Leave some food behind and they'll welcome you back next time. The different things that we're going to be looking at today is the wood pellet grill, the different cuts of meat and how to prepare them, and then also a particular spice rub I'm very fond of. But let's turn our attention to the Pit Boss wood pellet grill and we'll go over that. So this is a Pit Boss wood pellet grill that I filled up with these wood pellets, and you can get them in various wood types. Hickory, apple, mesquite. Mesquite is the one that I usually prefer. This today is hickory. And if you even wanted to, you could buy several different kinds of wood and mix them together and create a very unique smoke on the meat that you're going to be cooking. Now, you can focus a little bit down here on the thermometer. And where I'm going to be smoking today is at 225 degrees. And these aren't really so accurate that you have to worry about. It's going to be a little bit above it, maybe up to even 5 degrees higher. And what we want to do, just like if you're going to be baking a cake, you preheat your heat source. So I've turned this on 225, and what we have here is these pellets from gravity descend down to an auger that rotates and dispenses a small amount down in the bottom, that then a fire is created and then the smoke comes out. This is a pretty small unit, and I have it here at my sister's house that whenever I come over, I'm able to do some small cooking. It's barely big enough for a brisket, at least a Texas-sized brisket that is quite large. But for the little bit of smoking I do here, this works out pretty well, and I just do it in batches. And you may notice I have some aluminum foil here on the base of it. It's just making cleanup a lot easier. So the rubs that you put on the briskets or the fish or the ribs, anything, that's always important because that's what's really going to be imparting additional flavor. And for years, I used to make my own spice blends, and they were always fine, but I would run out, wouldn't always have all the many different ingredients. So several years ago, a friend of mine on Facebook was talking about Espinosa Spice Company, and that he just loved the spice blend that they had. And I thought, well, you know, I know this person, and if they think it's good, let me go give it a shot. So I went online, and you can see how to contact this company to get some if you would like. But I got online and ordered a bottle of it, and I went ahead and got the brisket blend because that's what I usually cook. Texans and brisket go hand in hand. And whenever I got it in, we had been using another spice blend from here in Fort Worth called Risky's. It's a barbecue chain here in Fort Worth, and we always liked it very much. But we went ahead and put this on some steaks and grilled them up, and I asked my family, what do you think? We're always eating Risky's. We like that pretty well. It's much better than my house blend. What do you consider about this? And 100% of us thought that this was far better. And so since then, I've been buying this, and they are not promoting this YouTube cast. It's just something that I love, and if I love it, I'm going to tell you about it. And it's a wonderful brisket blend. We use it on everything. Honestly, there's probably nothing that we don't put on. It's even great on burgers. But it's a wonderful thing, and I would encourage you that if you're interested and if you're curious about different blends, try this. Get on the website, look them up. It's the Espinosa Spice Company. Brisket blend is my favorite, and I thought that that would be great for me to share. Now, we're going to look at two different cuts of meat. Right now is some pork baby back ribs that I got yesterday. And if you look here, I got 8.81 pounds of this, and I think there's about 3 or 4 in here. I'm just gonna open this package up. See what we have. Yes, we have 3 ribs, racks of ribs. And what we want to do is just look them over. They all look really nice, nice marbling. And maybe you've seen ribs being prepared before, either pork or beef ribs, and you're gonna see that maybe some people have talked to you about a membrane that is back here. And if you can get a close up, you see this little bit of a membrane. And I'm just going to do a little separation on it. And I'm gonna go get a paper towel and get a good hold of it so I can pull that membrane off. Now, let's talk about this membrane. You can leave the membrane on this and still cook it. It is not gonna harm you. What it is that whenever you look for your guests to enjoy the food, you don't want them to have to struggle with something. And this membrane, once it's cooked, it's barbecued, it becomes like a very hard plastic. And all you have to do is cut through it, and it won't really be that much of a problem. But really, when you want to refine the experience so that people that are eating at your home, they don't have to struggle with it, you just peel this off. So one of the cornerstones about these videos is for me doing it in real time and not doing a lot of prep to where it's confusing for you so that you don't struggle with it. So I'm going to do this in real time. So that means I'm going to make it very vulnerable that if it takes a lot longer and looks a lot harder than it sometimes does, then you get to see it. So I've gotten this membrane. I have it with, look at that. Okay. So this is perfection. This is the easiest way to peel these off. It's not that hard when it works. When it doesn't work very well, then it's just a pain in the neck. So I'm sure out of these 3, we'll get one that's gonna be cantankerous, or this one at the very last little bit's gonna be cantankerous. I actually just have to find that membrane again. There you go. And yes, that's coming off right there. All right, so that's one. Let's see how this second one is doing. Right over here. It's fine, here we go. This is the better end of it. And you can tell that this is slick looking and this is a little rough looking. That's just the difference of the membrane on or the membrane off. That's probably fine there. That came off perfect. If you struggle with it, then just realize sometimes it comes off easy, sometimes it's a little bit harder. But it's never so hard that you just are gonna give up on it. At least I don't want you to, because this really makes it nicer for the people that are eating. And I'm using a paper towel because, as you can tell, it's a little slick, and that paper towel makes it easier to grab onto this membrane. And then the minute you're able to do that, then it comes off much easier. A little bit here I want to get. Don't let this part deter you from doing ribs. Again, if you didn't want to do that, that's fine. And once you become more comfortable with things, then you're willing to try to make it a little bit nicer each time. I believe I have all that off. So what I've done now, or what I'm going to do now, is get this rub on it. And ribs are often done in a method that is called 2-2-1 or 3-2-1. And that means 2 hours uncovered is the first number. It's either 3-2-1 or 2-2-1, whichever you like. And you know, this could be beef ribs, it could be baby back, it could be St. Louis style. I like the 2-2-1. So that's going to be 2 hours uncovered. Then I'm going to wrap each one of them up in aluminum foil, and that's another 2 hours, and then the last hour uncovered. Oftentimes, if I do a 3-2-1, I find that the meat just completely comes off the bone, and I really prefer for this to be where you hold the bone and you bite into it and it doesn't just completely fall off. So you can tell I'm outside. You hear the mockingbird singing its song at the moment. Now, I don't put as much on the back because that's really not the meat part of it. I do a little bit, but then I do like to make it where it's over the next piece of meat. Just be good and liberal with it. I always look for enough to where the color changes on the meat, and this helps create a beautiful bark. And a bark is that crispy part. Usually on a brisket or a pork butt, you always will have somebody fighting over that crispy, slightly chewy, caramelized fat that has the extra flavor on it. And there's always one or two in the crowd, so I want to give them something wonderful to eat on. And we can go ahead and start getting this right on the grill, the smoker. You take a look at the temperature there. It says 240, so that's already above the 225 that I have it set on, but that's okay. That's not going to bother anything. There's going to be plenty of airflow, and this is going to be the first 2 hours of it cooking just like this. So at this point, you'd want to set a timer, probably for an hour. Take a good look at it. What are you looking for? Is it overly dry? It wouldn't be, I think, on this kind of a grill. And what we see that the minute we've opened this up, that temperature dropped down to 200. So we just recognize that. So this is a pork butt, sometimes called a Boston butt. And this is a bone-in one, which means that there is a bone inside of it. And it's a very strange bone. It's kind of a T-bone, but it's very wide. It often reminds me of like a moose's antler. So that very wide bone goes all the way through. You can buy them boneless, and I don't like that one because what they do, they come in here and they cut that bone out and they've left this open. So if you don't tie it up, then the pork butt can get very dry in those areas. And even though a pork butt is marbled with fat, which means it's very forgiving, you can somewhat overcook a pork butt and it won't be a problem in the least. But that extra part that's open is too dry. And so I like it where the bone is always in it, and that's also a great indicator to know that you're done. When this bone can be pulled out easily, your pork butt's finished, and so that's always a great indicator. But on this one, let's see, this is a 9.3 pound pork butt, bone-in pork Boston butt, And I'm gonna open it up. And here's a term that you may not be used to, but this is called the fat cap. Also, we usually refer to this as the top. So you can see that it's got a nice bit of fat. It's not too much in the least. And this is, I always cook with the fat cap facing up, so that when this fat melts through the cooking process, it's continuing to moisten and it's kind of self-baste the meat. And then you see that there's other fat running through this, and this is what makes it so forgiving. The meat doesn't have much of a chance to get dried out if there's fat in there, and that fat will continue to break down during the long cooking process. So like with the ribs that we have on, it's a 2-2-1 that I'm going to use today. But for this, for a pork butt about this size, I'm easily going to go 6 to 8 hours. And I hope the minute I said that, some of you don't check out on me. If you happen to have a pellet grill, which is great for folks who are not necessarily accustomed to smoking, that's the best thing for you. It's kind of a set it and forget it, and all you have to do is continue to remember to add pellets to it as it depletes the source. What I always cook with is what we call a stick burner. So it's an offset smoker. One end of it, you put a little charcoal and you have wood and you smoke that way. And why I love that so much is because I'm not a set it and forget it kind of a barbecuer. I like to be with it. Every 15 minutes or so, I'll go out there and check the temperature and check the smoke level and move the meat around. It's an enjoyment for me. So whenever I've worked with these wood pellet grills, I don't really get that level of enjoyment. You just put the meat on, you set a timer, you make sure that every hour you check the pellet so that there's plenty in there, and you go about your business. And that may be absolutely perfect for you. If you know that that box of pellets will last you 2 hours and you put some meat on it, like this pork butt that's going to cook 6 to 8 hours, you can go shopping for an hour and a half, or go do housework or do yard work, all that. That's very, very convenient. So I'm not knocking that. It's just not necessarily my preference. But they do a really good job. The Pit Boss is a brand that I think is really good, and it's going to make this delicious. But what I will do is I will add the seasoning all over this, and then we will put it in the fridge, because we have, actually I'm going to set it out. Let me not take you there, because it's only a few hours, 5 hours on those ribs. I want this to get closer to room temperature, because the colder the meat, the longer the cook is going to take. So you might as well get this closer to room temperature so that you don't have to cook it longer than the 6 to 8 hours. So in this, I'm going to be very, very liberal. I put a lot on here. And no, this does not make it salty where you don't enjoy it, not in the least. This makes a beautiful bark. I rub it in all those sides. And then this is where I get cost effective. On this last side, I'm going to come in here and get all of this and attach it back to this pork butt. Now again, this is the fat cap side. And so this is where I'm going to take that last little bit, because I don't want to waste this good rub. There's no reason to do that. And it's just going to soak in. Going to kind of dry marinate it. I think that that's a kind of a new term. I don't think that's something I'm used to, but it makes sense. Texas style barbecue is definitely dry rubs. We don't do a wet marinade, and we definitely don't put barbecue sauce on the majority of the meat we do, and we normally do brisket. I thought I would try or use the pork butt and the ribs, because pork is much more forgiving, and it would be something I feel like you might try first. The brisket, we'll do another YouTube video on that when I'm back at my house with my offset barbecue smoker. And it's a much larger cut of meat, and it's a different process. But low and slow is what barbecue is. Now, I know in certain parts of the country, barbecue means hamburgers and hot dogs and steaks. And for Texas ears, that makes no sense whatsoever. That's when you're grilling something. And yes, you might grill on something that you could also smoke or barbecue on, but if you're inviting me over to your house for a barbecue and I get hamburgers and hot dogs, I'm going to be really confused and I'm going to be very disappointed. If you're inviting me over for hamburgers and hot dogs, I'm going to be happy if that's what you serve. But grilling is whenever you're over direct heat. Barbecue and smoking is indirect heat. That means that the heat source is away, it's not up underneath it, and the heat flows through and the smoke flows through, and you have a stack, and that smoke goes from the box over the meat and then up the stack and out. And you regulate the amount of smoke by the intake of the air on one end and the output of the smokestack, and that's where you can really regulate the heat to a very low 225 to 250 for most meats, and then you do it for many hours until the meat is thoroughly cooked. And yes, there's temperatures for each one of them. One thing is that we now live in the Pacific Northwest, and we're doing a lot of pork butts. It's hard to get really nice sized briskets like you get here in Texas. So we do though, we still buy them when we can find them, and I smoke them and I cut certain sections off and I freeze them, and we'll get to it. So if I'm going to go out and barbecue all day, I'm going to put a lot of meat on there, some chicken, some pork butt, a brisket. My barbecue can handle all that, and then throw it in the freezer so that if you know, we're lazy one day, we know we want something, we pull it out, we thaw it, and that's what we're going to eat. Pork butts, smoked pork butts even, are very versatile. What I'll do with one this size for my sister's home, this is going to be cut up into 3 different sections, and she'll vacuum seal each section and make that for 3 separate dinners. So don't think that you have to eat all of this at once. Now, up in the Pacific Northwest where we live now, is really a wasteland from Tex-Mex that we really enjoy. You just can't find any up there that meets the standards that we love. So we've had to learn how to make it. So one thing that I do a lot with the smoked pork butt is make tamales out of it. Now, if you were going to make tamales, and we can do a completely different episode of that, you would take this very same pork butt and you wouldn't put the dry rub on it, and you would put it either in a crock pot and cook it until it's falling off the bone, or you could do it in the oven with a cover on it until it's falling off the bone. So that's what you would start with to make pork tamales. We, though, really love the smoke flavor, and so we make our tamales out of the smoked pork butt. And it's if you haven't tried that, if you make tamales, if that's your heritage and your culture, then maybe you might want to try it this way. It really adds a nice depth of flavor to the tamales. And it's whenever you have a family, like we have a family of 4, we won't sit down and eat all of this at once, and you don't want it to go to waste. So you eat what you want on it, and the rest you'll shred up or chop up and put it in a freezer bag and wait until you're making tamales, or make tamales soon. And you know, tamales are an all-day affair almost. It's really a lot of fun, and it brings the family together. But we've got this rubbed up. It's waiting for the 5 hours. We're going to go set it inside, cover it, and just let it get to room temperature. And we're going to be checking back in as we cook the ribs, and then we'll show you as we put the pork butt on the barbecue smoker. And we're happy to have you on this journey. We'll check back with you in just a minute. Okay, so it's been 2 hours since we put on the ribs. You can see that there's a little bit of the juice that's come out. The bones have come away a little bit. And there's not much of a bend in it at the moment, which is fine. It still has a good amount of cooking to go on. So I'm going to move this over to the aluminum foil, put on some more flavors, and we're going to wrap it, and they're going to come back. So let me show you how I do on the wrapping. What I'm going to do is I've melted some butter, and I'm wanting to put a little bit of moisture on these ribs. And a little sweetness, so I have some honey. That'll make a nice glaze. Then I'm going to add just a little bit more of the rub. Just creating a nice bark. I'm going to wrap this up nice and tight. And I'm going to do the same with the next 2 wraps, and then we'll put them back on the grill for another 2 hours. This is the last of the 3. Some more melted butter. Gives a nice richness, a nice sheen. The honey. More of the rub. Wrap this up nicely. So now I have all 3 of the ribs with butter, honey, a little bit more of the rub, wrapped up tightly. I have them back on the smoker, and we're not changing the temperature at all, but since it's been open, it's dropped down to 185, which is fine. It's going to come back up in temperature, and then we're going to let this go for another 2 hours. Now, I may come back in an hour and look at them, and if they're really soft, I may do a 2-1-1. So 2 hours uncovered, 1 hour wrapped, and 1 hour unwrapped. But let's just take a look at it in an hour and see what we do. So after 1 hour of them being covered, I checked them and they were bendable. So that means the meat is really getting tender. So now I have opened up the aluminum foil, so they're getting to get the bark reestablished because they were much steamier and much wetter. And they are going to have 1 more hour uncovered, then they'll be ready. So it's about 30 minutes into the last hour, and I'm wanting to put a little bit of a glaze on them. And I have taken a half a stick of butter, a couple tablespoons of molasses, and a couple tablespoons of honey. And I've just blended that together in this bowl, but I want to kind of paint or drizzle on this to give them a really pretty finish. This will just kind of set and make them very beautiful and add a nice little sticky coating, which you kind of like with ribs. And they have still 1/2 hour left on the last of the 2-1-1, which was 2 hours uncovered, 1 hour wrapped in foil, and the last hour open again so it gets a crust. Well, it has been 1 hour of them open. There's a beautiful sheen on them. So it's time to take them out and let them cool off before we package them for a future dinner. We've kept the barbecue at 225. We've just taken the ribs off. Now it's time to put the pork butt on. It's got to room temperature, and the dry rub has set nicely on there for a dry marinade. Now we're going to let this go for at least 6 hours, maybe up to 8, but we'll check back and give some photo opportunities to see how it progresses. So the pork butt is setting at 240 degrees. It's been going on for an hour. It's drying out, which is good. Setting that bark, which is beautiful. We're going to continue to let it go. It's still got lots more hours. Okay, we tested these pork ribs and they came right off the bone perfectly. Very good. So the pork butt has been on for about 4 to 4.5 hours right now. And this is the point where I usually start wrapping it up. And let me show you the process for that and do a little explaining. So this is what's called pink butcher paper. It is really special from the standpoint of it doesn't steam the meat. If you were to put this pork butt into a aluminum foil wrap, then you're really going to steam it for the remainder of its time cooking. But this actually allows some breathing to go on, and it's really phenomenal. So I would encourage you to find it. This here is called Hardcore Carnivore Barbecue Paper. It can be called pink butcher paper, but any kind of a Google search is going to get you to this type of paper. And it's really, really useful. I do not consider this gimmicky in the least. It's just a necessary part of my barbecuing. And now you're going to notice that earlier, whenever I did the ribs, I did not use this. I could have, but I really do want to steam the ribs a little bit whenever I'm doing that. So I was happy going the route that I did with the aluminum foil. Now, I'm struggling more than with this, and I have done all the meat combined. That's always the fun part. There we go. So I'm going to take the pork butt off and set it right here and wrap it up. I think the really important thing to do is to get it good and tight. If you are good at Christmas wrapping, birthday wrapping, this is what you're going to be good at as well. And then this will be put, you see, it's going to soak through a little bit, and that's perfectly fine. But we're going to go ahead and put this and cook it for about another 2 hours to 2.5 hours. And I'll show you what it looks like when we're done there. So this pork butt has gone about 9.5 hours, and it is done. We're going to let this cool, and then we're going to, and see this fat cap that we saw earlier? This is the time when this can just be removed a little bit. So we don't need that there any longer. It's basted. And see, if you're worried about the fat in the beginning, it's still very much there to take off. But we're going to let this cool. Then we're going to divide it up, put it into particular bags to eat at a later date. And this freezes beautifully. And we'll probably divide this into thirds tomorrow. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this session on smoking and barbecuing pork ribs and a Boston pork butt.